Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Yevamos Daf Ayin Vav. We are holding two lines from the top of the Amid. And picking up from yesterday, where we learned that a Pitzua Daka, a Kruz Shafcha, an individual who sustained an injury in the area of the Ever HaZachar, which makes him unable to bear children. He may not marry a Bas Yisrael. Amongst those injuries is Nikav, a puncture in that conduit which is meant to transport the Zera. Says the Gemara, Omar Yudam Shmuel. Nikav, suppose the Gid, the Ever HaZachar, sustained a Nekev, a puncture, Vinestam, and then it got plugged up. It appears like it repaired itself. How do we discern whether or not it was really repaired? What's the test? Kol she'ilu nikri. We take a look and see if this fellow experiences an accumulation. Nikri is lashon carry, an accumulation of zera, which exerts pressure in that area. And what happens as a result of a nikra? It tears apart. It reopens. That's an indication of an incomplete recovery. It wasn't properly healed, and therefore he was puzzled. But otherwise, if when the pressure is exerted, there is no reopening of that nekav, then we know it was properly healed, kosher, he's okay. Rava wanted to know, where is this nekav to be found? Hey, where? Is it below the atara? As we learned yesterday, the concern is only from the atara, that's the ridge, the raised flesh at the tip of the aver, from the atara back towards the guf. That is called gid. That is the ikar aver. But from the atara downward, away from the guf. In that area, there's no concern, Rashi told us in the Mishnah, not just bistra ba'almas like flesh. It's not the true gid. So where is this nekev? Ilay mulamata matar, below the atara, away from the guf. Why test? Why have to investigate whether it was healed or not? Afilu nichros nami, even if it was totally removed, there's no concern. Skip the hole, even if it's not there. It doesn't affect him. Oh, and Rashi adds, what about lamala mi atara, from the atara back towards the guf? Says Rashi, there is no accumulation of zera there. That's not where it accumulates. That's not where the pressure is generated. And in that case, once it looks like it's healed, it's okay. So this formula, this point of testing him through an accumulation of zera, cannot be below the atara. Even if it's gone, it's okay. It can't be above the atara. We never have this issue. It doesn't accumulate at that point. Ela b'atara atzma leaves us with only one option, the actual atara area itself, the tip of the gid. As the Ritva explains, in that area, if it's nikri v'nikra, if it's accumulated and then tears apart, then we're concerned that it will tear back up towards the guf, which is above the atara. So if that's what happens, you see an accumulation, and then it tears back up, makes its way up towards the guf. It's above the atara. The injury in that mokim is a concern. Itmernami. We learned likewise the name of Amar Rav Mari Bar Mar Amar Mar Ukamar Shmo Nikev Batara Atzma. If there was a nekev in the atara itself, v'niastam, and it was plugged, we do this test. Kol Shilo Nikri v'Nikra Apostle. If we see him experiencing the accumulation of the zera, and then we see it tearing apart, you know it wasn't properly healed. He is positive in lav kosher, but otherwise he's okay. So how do we do this test? Sholach le Rava. Brei de Rabba. He sent a question to Rav Yosef. Ilam Deinu Rabbeinu, can you teach us? Hechi Avdinin, how do we bring about this accumulation of zera? Amalei, he says, very simple. My sinon nahama chamimo. We bring some warm bread, this ari, barley bread. Uman chinala, we place it at the prukri, at the anal area, which warms them up and brings about an accumulation of zera or mikri. V'chazin, then we take a close look and see how it affects the nekev. Omer Abaye, why go to such great lengths? Atu kuli alma. Do you mean to say that everybody's on the same level as Yaakov Avinu Havoy? Everybody's a Yaakov Avinu who is so insulated from these concepts. The Chsibbe, the pasuk by Yaakov describes him as right? He said, "This is my first expression of Zera, Reuven, right? He never experienced any keri. Not everybody's on that same level, who's so insulated and so protected. You don't need to go to such great lengths, to warm bread, etc., to bring about a keri. It must be a more simple method of doing it. Elar Abaye, this is how you do it. Ma'avrin kamei, we put before him big day tzivain, colorful clothing of a woman, that evoked the accumulation of zera. Amar Rava, you think everybody is so susceptible? With just a little thing like that, suddenly there's keri. Ati kuli alma, everybody's barzilai hagil adihu, are susceptible to this concept, like this fellow Barzilai Hagiladi in the time of David HaMelech. He was overcome with, he was very involved with znus, and he indeed is very sensitive to these types of things, but typically it wouldn't affect a person to that extent. Just a little big day tzivayin, it wouldn't do the job. El machavarta, rather the correct approach is kiddush shan and mikara, as we explained earlier, with the warm bread. Ton Rabbanan, nikav pasel. If he experienced a nekev in the gid, he is puzzled because now the zera sort of flows and trickles instead of being emitted properly. Nistam, but then it gets plugged and healed. Kasher, he's back to normal. Because going forward, he has the ability to bear children. Here's an example of a psal which can be reinstated, which can revert back to kashrus. The healing process, it really is effective in this case. Now this is a proper effective process. Zeu limutimai, as opposed to what? What is considered an ineffective healing process? Limute as opposed to krum. You have some sort of superficial, flimsy scab. She'ola machmas maka bereya. This is aloch and treifos, right? So an animal has a reya, lung, where you notice a hole, and it was covered up by some krum, some flimsy membrane, which was generated machmas maka because of a little wound next to it, and that sort of spread over, covered the hole. The inner krum, it's not considered a proper membrane, a proper plug, a proper closure of that hole. So by the nekev in the Eivar Zocher, here as well, you have to make sure that it's properly healed, properly closed up, not just superficially with some sort of membrane. So how do you go about it? How do you create a proper plug? Sholach li Rav Idi bar Abaye sent Abaye a shaila. Chavdinan, how do we ensure proper healing? My sinon sa'arta, we take a sharp barley. Umasartinale, we scrape around the hole, which generates more, material and pus and whatever, not pus, but blood or clotting material. Umaisinan tarba, then we bring some fatty material. Vishaifinan, we smear it in the area to keep it wet and lubricated. Umaisinan shum shana, we bring a worm, gamla, a large worm. Umanachtinale, we stick it right into that hole to plug it. Upaskinale l'reisha, we remove its head so it stays there. And slowly but surely, as the ant, which is no longer alive, it shrivels and recedes, the flesh around that hole will now cover up and slowly heal the hole. So the plug, the shumshana, keeps it, insulated and germ-free, and this allows for a proper, gradual healing process. But that dafka sa'ar, to only use a piece of barley, a parzala, but using a piece of metal can actually bring detrimental results. Mizraf zarif, it can add to the injury. V'hanimi likata, and this only applies to a small hole, which can heal properly. Avagadla, if it's a large hole, it won't heal properly. Mikpuli mikpul, the surrounding flesh will just roll and peel back and not close properly. Amarabba barafuna. Here comes another chiddush. Hamatal mayim shtei mekames pasal. As we learned yesterday, there's a conduit specific for the urine, a conduit for the zera. Suppose the barrier between the two conduits gets disrupted, and this fellow is now going to be matal mayim, as meraglaim, through the regular channel, and also it's going to be diverted through the channel of the zera. Pasal, this fellow is considered krushavcha, etc. He can't bear children because it interferes with the proper development and flowing and emission of the zera. That's Rabba's shita. Rabba, the son of Rav Huna. Amarava, we don't paskin like this. Les helchas alekevra. We don't paskin like this son. Rabba, the son of Rav Huna. We don't hold of this halacha. V'loika abba, nor like the father who was Rav Huna. What does he mean? We don't paskin like son, bra, hadamar, and the halacha that we just mentioned, because we hold that even if the shesin is to be found coming out of the other area, it's still not going to interfere. The zera still has the ability to run through it properly, develop, and emit properly. Abba, the halacha of the father as well. We don't agree with that. Who was that Rav Huna? Damar Rav Huna. Nosham hamasoilos zubazu. If you find that women interact with each other physically in an inappropriate way, psulois l'kuhuna, makes them pasul l'kuhuna, he considers them to be a zayna, because they're imitating the way men and women interact. That's Rav Huna's chiddush. We don't hold to that. V'afilu Rabbi Eliezer, because we hold that even Rabbi Eliezer, who has an extreme shita, the Amar Panoya Ba ala Panuya, an unmarried man interacts with an unmarried woman as married, Shaloi L'Shamishus, not for the sake of marriage. He holds Asa Zoina. She now constitutes a Zoina. Even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that in our case there's no Zoina. Hana Mili Isha. That's only if a man interacts with a woman as married. Aval Isha, but when it's between two females, although it's inappropriate, Pritzusa Ba'am, it's merely Pritza's inappropriateness, but it doesn't make her a Zoina, and she's still kosher to marry a Kohen. The Rambam, however, brings this lahalach. He says, sure, it doesn't make her a Zoina, but it's Kamasai Eretz Mitzrayim, it's the Teyevis, inappropriateness which was exhibited in Mitzrayim. He says he's not allowed to do it. In fact, there's a shaila in the Achronim how to learn the Rambam. Some learn at the Rambam hold it's asam and Torah. That's Kamasei Eretz Mitzrayim, and some learn it's from the Rabbanon. In any case, female interaction is asur and is sourced in this Gemara right here. Continues the Mishnah. Pitzur daka krus shavcha. These individuals who are unable to bear children, although they cannot marry an ordinary Bas Yisrael, but mutaran b'giyores u'meshachreres, they can marry a convert, they can marry a maidservant who was set free. Why? Ve'enon asurin ela milava b'kol. They cannot intermarry with the call, the original call, but the supplemental individuals, the ones who joined us, the giyores, meshachreres, are allowed to marry these fellows. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, lo yovai pitzur daka krus shavcha hu b'kahal Hashem. Boom, named Rav Sheshes, the following question was posed to Rav Sheshes. Now that we know that a Pitzur Dak is limited in his choices, he can't marry a regular Bas Yisrael. What about a Pitzur Daka who is a Kohen? Typically, a Kohen cannot marry a Giyoris, a Meshachreris. But if he's a Pitzur Daka who is unable to marry a Yisraelis, do we allow him to marry the other individuals? Mahu Begiyoris, Meshachreris, can he marry those? What's the question? Why would you say his? Big Dersha say Kaivi Asr. On the one hand, you can say, look, a Kain is a Kain. Even though he can't have children, even though he can't marry a Yisraelis, he still maintains his Kedusha status, the Asr, and therefore cannot interact with a Geyeris, a Meshachreris. Or perhaps you can say, look, La Big Dersha say Kai Vishari. The fact that he cannot marry a Yisraelis indicates that he's not designated, in the context of marriage. He's no longer designated. Kedusha means designation. He no longer has that same designation as an ordinary Kohen. I cannot marry Yisraelis, so I'm not reserved for Yisraelis. So perhaps I lose some of that designation. I lose some of that status. He's sort of a downgraded Kohen, Vishari, and therefore can marry others as well, like Giyoris and Meshachreris. So in the context of marriage, he sort of now broadens his options. That was the question. Amalur Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes responds in the affirmative. In fact, we have arrived from a Bryce. Tani Suah. We have a brisa which says, "B'tzur daka Yisrael." She's comparing the kind to the Yisrael. A Yisrael who has this condition cannot marry a Yisraelis, but mutar ben Nesina. He can marry an isha from the Nesinim, as one of the 7 nations who were present in Eretz Yisrael when Yisrael arrived. They converted. Typically, we don't need to marry with Nesinim, but this Yisrael who's a B'tzur daka, who cannot marry a regular Yisraelis. He's no longer meant for Yisraelis. He's not designated for marriage with a Yisraelis. He's been downgraded. In the realm of marriage, he's been downgraded. He lost some of his status, and therefore he's mutar ben Nesina, and likewise, by us, the Kayan should be treated in the same way. If you'll tell me that the Yisrael, who is a B'tzur daka, still maintains that same original status, how could he marry a Nesina? It's a love. Ikri Khan will apply the pasuk which says, "Loitis chatein bam." He may not marry them. Apparently, he's no longer considered b'kedushas Yisrael, meaning within the realm of marriage. In the context of nisuin, he broadens his options. Amar Rava. Rava responds and challenges Rav Shesh's raya. How could you compare? Atu Hasam. The issue of marrying a guy, is it based on Mishum Kedusha, V'lav Kedusha? Is it based on Kedusha? No, absolutely not. It's not based on Kedusha. If it were based on Kedusha, I would understand that, even if they convert, like the Nesinim, they were ger. If the concern is Kedusha, I understand why you have to hold back from marrying the Nesina. That's not the issue. The reason why we don't marry Goyim is unrelated to Kedusha. Dilma Meilid Ben, rather it's the concern that when marrying a non-Jew, he will have a child. V'azil palach lavetzgechavim, who will then be diverted to idol worship. As the pasuk speaks about that concern, don't marry because that child might be taken over to the guy, to the Avodah Zarah. That's the concern. That's the basis for the Isser of intermarriage. And therefore, says Rava, we can very well understand it only applies when she's really a guy, but not when she converted. That's only when they're still goyim. Don't marry so that that child doesn't join the Avodah Zarah. But once they convert, like in the case of the Nesinim, Ki Megairi, be Yisrael Shari, technically, Minat Torah, now they can marry a Yisrael. Why not? Why don't we? V'Rabbanan u'Degazibru, as we're going to see later in the parak. There's a Gzera Midrabbanan, Yeshua, Bezdin of David. Don't marry them. They exhibited very negative character traits, etc. We're going to see later on. It's a Din Rabbanan. And now I can understand there'll be a distinction between a conventional Yisrael or a B'tzur daka. You know why? When did the Rabbanan apply a Gzera? When did they disallow marriage with a guy who converted? We're speaking about obviously the Shiva Amamim, those 7 nations. The regular guy who converts is okay. We're speaking about specifically the Nesinim, who were part of the original 7 nations present at Yisrael, and then they converted. So the Rabbanan made a Gzera. You know who may not marry them? B'hanach b'nei aludi. Only a Yisrael who can bear children. Because look, it's similar to the Isser of marrying a guy. It sort of mirrors it. Don't marry a guy because that child will be taken to Avodah Zarah. Don't marry the Nesinim Midrabbanan because of a similar concern. We're speaking about the same type of person. That's how Rashi learns it. It was modeled. The Gzera Rabbanan is modeled after the Isser Torah. Only a fellow who can have children has this Isser. Aval Hai, the Lab Bari Uludi, but a Krishaf, a B'tzur daka who can't bear children, like Gazru Rabbanan. I can very well understand there's no Gzera Rabbanan there. So that would explain the Brisa, why a Yisrael B'tzur daka is allowed to marry a Nesina. Again, Minat Torah, the Isser only applies to a guy. Once she converts, there's no Isser Minat Torah. It's a Midrabbanan. It only applies to a fellow who can bear children. A P'tzur Daka Yisrael doesn't have that Gzera. But you, Rav Sheshes, are trying to draw a parallel from there. You're trying to prove from there that a P'tzur Daka loses his Kedusha because he can't marry a regular Israeli. He loses the Kedusha within the context of marriage and can marry anybody. And therefore a Kohen as well, who is a P'tzur Daka, can marry a Giyaris, a Shechreris. Who's to say that's true? There's a specific heter here. A fellow who can't bear children doesn't have the Gzera D'Rabbanan of marrying a Nasan. Okay, but a Kohen still has his Kedusha and shouldn't marry somebody who is not meant to marry otherwise. Now the Gemara will just dwell on this criterion presented by Rava, that the Gzera D'Rabbanan only applies to a fellow who can have children. Elamiyat, if that's the case, mamzer. What happens to a mamzer? The bar eiludi. He can bear children. Hachanami de aser. Rava, do you mean to say that a mamzer shouldn't marry a nasina? But none. We have a Mishnah in Mesechas Kedushin. Mamzerim unasinim mutarim lavadabazeh. Mamzer and nasan can intermarry. So apparently that's not the prevailing criterion. Eller says the Gemara, okay, we'll switch it just to drop. Ki gaz rabban b'ksher. Marrying a guy is not Torah. Marrying nasinim after gerus is only with rabbanon. And when do the rabbanon apply the gzera b'ksher? When it's a regular Yisrael kasher, b'psulim like gaz rabbanon, but not a puzzle such as a mamzer. Or a P'tzur Daka, etc. Why not? Why don't we have a gzera there? So Rashi says because it's a milsa de loy shchicha. It's not something which is common and prevalent. And we know the Chachamim would not apply their gzeras to uncommon situations. Okay, but in any case, Rava still holds his ground. Rav Sheshes, you can't bring a raya to allow a kohen, P'tzur Daka, to go ahead and marry a Giyaris Mishachreris. Perhaps he maintains his Kedusha, despite the fact that he's limited in his options. He can't marry Israel. Still, he maintains his Kedusha. He shouldn't go and defile his Kedusha and marry somebody inappropriate. The fact that a Yisrael P'tzur Daka can marry a Nasinim, because look, the whole concept of a Nasan is only Rabbanan, and was limited to Ksheira but not to P'sul. So at this point, Rava challenged of Sheshes' halacha. Comes back to Gemara. Hadama Rava. Rava came back and says, no, you know what? Let's go along with Rav Sheshes. Lav milsei de amri. What I said was incorrect. B'giyusan les lu chasnas. B'giyusan. B'yoysan, different gerses. B'giyusan b'gichav les lu chasnas. You see, what was Rava's argument? He said, look, minat Torah, intermarriage with a guy is only asr when they're goyim. That's the Ikki Isser. Once they are Giyaris, like the Nasinim, once they convert, there's no Isser minat Torah. It's only with the Rabbanon. And as we explained, the Isser Rabbanon is only applicable in certain situations. That's how Rav explained the whole, sequence of events, the whole arrangement. Says Rav, it's incorrect. My starting point was inaccurate. You cannot say that the Isser of marrying a guy applies when they're actually goyim. You know why? There's no concept of marriage when they're still goyim. Rashi brought it a while ago. He says, "Bulas bal yeshlam." There's no concept of a kiddushin. You can't marry the guy. It doesn't exist. So the Torah says, don't marry a guy, loisis chatin b'hem. It can't be speaking about when they're still goyim. There's no marriage at that point. This is gairu. Islu chasnas. It's only once they are giyaris. And the concept of marriage kicks in. And here the Torah says, don't marry. Apparently. And the sinim may not intermarry, may not Torah. So even though they're giyaris, even though they converted, loisis chatamam, don't marry the 7 nations, the Shiva Amamin, even after they're Gerim. So having said that, How do you explain the halacha mentioned in the Brisa that a Yisrael who's a Betzur Daka can't bear children, he can go marry none other than an Asina? What do you mean? It's Asa Minat Torah. You can't say, well, it's only the Rabbanan in certain cases. It's Minat Torah. That's the primary Issa. Don't marry one of the Shiva Amamin after Geras. Oh, apparently. A Betzur Daka, since he's unavailable for Yisrael, he can't marry Bas Yisrael. His options are limited. He loses that Kedusha, that designation, and he can marry in Asina as well. Likewise, says Rav Sheshes, you're on target. A Kohen as well, who's a Betzur Daka, who can't access a Bas Yisrael, his Kedusha, his designation, has been somewhat diminished and affected, and now he's free to marry even a Geyeres and Meshacheres, who he wouldn't have been allowed to marry otherwise. So that's the conclusion. And Tosfos asks a kasha. Here we say that the Isra Chaten refers dafka after conversion, and the Gemara of the Zora seems to just assume, take for granted, that interacting with a Goysha woman as married would be also Minat Torah, even while she's still a guy. So Tosfos said the two Isurim, you're right. Loisas Chaten Bam, marriage, is only applicable after Geras. That only applies once they're Nizgayer, if it's from the 7 nations. But the pasuk continues and says, "Bitay lo sikach lebnecha." Don't even reach into that. Don't even take from them. Bitay lo sikach. Even if there's no legal marriage, you're just interacting with him as married. That's also an isser. And therefore, certainly there's a makar for interacting, for isser with interacting with a guy, whether through marriage, which would be after gerus, or even without a proper marriage, meaning while they're still in the state of goy. Okay, continues the Gemara. So you mean that chasnus, marriage, is not applicable by a goy? Moser Rav Yosef, vayischaten shleim bas pari melch Mitzrayim Shlomo HaMelech. Vayischaten, marriage with bas pari. Giyure Gaira, he converted her. She was a Yisrael. We don't accept Gerim at that high point in Jewish history. Volek Hiblush Gerim. Wouldn't accept Gerim at that point. While Yisrael were living the high life. Says the Gemara, Midu Hutama. Why don't we? We're concerned that perhaps the guy is motivated by ulterior motives. He's attracted by our success and royalty, which he wants to take apart. But here, Baspari, a daughter of royalty, she didn't need it. Apparently she was driven and motivated by altruistic motives, l'shem shemai. Okay, so he was Megayer. But still, she's an Egyptian. She's the first generation mitzvahs for which there's an Issa Torah. Right? And allowed to marry a mitzvahs. Zakar Shleim do it. Perhaps you'll say, yeah, the original Egyptians, they're gone. Rashi says they were drowned in the Yamsuf. These that live in Mitzrayim, that's the newcomers, they're not the native Egyptians. Vatanya, we have a brisa which indicates otherwise. When it comes to Egyptians, these are the same ones. Rabbi Yehuda Minyamin had a friend Minyamin, who was a ger Mitzri. He was a ger from Mitzrayim. Hayali Chaver, he was from me a friend. Mi Talmida Rakiva, one of the Talmida Rakiva, Amar Minyamin planned out his life as follows. He says, look, Ani Mitzri Rishain, V'nasatzi Mitzvahs Rishaina. Myself and my wife are both first generation Mitzrim. So I want to enable my generations to come to intermarry with Yisrael. So what am I going to do? Asi livni Mitzvah Shnia. My son, who's a second generation Mitzri, I'll give him a shidduch with another second generation Mitzris, which is legal. Kadei shehei ben b'ni roi lavavakol. So that my grandchild, who'll be a kosher Jew, can marry anybody. So clearly, even at that late point in history, they consider the Egyptians as the original ones. And the Isser of a Mitzri applies at that point, and Hakush Shlomo HaMelech married the Mitzris. And Tosfos asks a kasha. He brings many sources throughout Shas that we assume Sancherev came and just mixed everything up. He overturned Bilbil Kol Ha'olam, everything just totally displaced all the nations, and we no longer assume that the nations are the native original nations. So Tosfos says that applies to Ammon and Moav, as we find in the Gemara and Brachas, etc., but not when it comes to Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim had a 40-year Gzeira. The pasuk in Yecheskel says, promises to restore Mitzrayim after 40 years. So Mitzrayim was singled out. That's an exception, and the Mitzrayim are presumed to have been the same Mitzrayim. No, so that's the kasha. How could Shlomo marry Bas Pari? Amar Papa, he never married her. He lived with her as married, but there was no actual marriage, and therefore there was no Isser of marrying a Mitzris. So she wasn't a guy because she wasn't his guy, right? But as far as marriage, he kept away from that, and therefore there's no concern with the fact that she was a ger Mitzri. Amar Papa, Anan Mishloimo Leiku v'Neisiv. Are we going to ask from Shlomo HaMelech? Shloimo Leinasav Midi. He didn't actually marry her. The Chsiv, as the pasuk clearly says, that there was no marriage that took place. Minaga Yimasha Amar Hashem El Bnei Yisrael Lo Yisavayu B'hem. Pasuk says, look, all those Goyim who I warned you against interacting with them, they will make your hearts stray after their gods. Shlomo HaMelech chose to connect to them, to take Bas Pari. So it wasn't marriage. Rashi says la'avo, he had a desire. It was dear to him, but not in a ishus, in a marriage context. Elo kasha v'yischatin. So why does the pasuk use the word v'yischatin, which seems to indicate marriage? It's tantamount to marriage. Mitoich ava yisera she'ava, due to the excessive dearness which was exhibited by Shlomo HaMelech towards Bas Pari, Yimala olav hakosav kilo nischatin bo. Torah relates to it as though there was a chasnus, but there wasn't really a marriage. So bottom line is, according to this point in the Gemara, interacting with a guy, a real guy, as married would be asur, based on what Tosfos said, that there's a pasuk for that too. Marriage technically doesn't apply in that case. By these 7 nations, Shiva Amamin, including the Nasinim, even after they converted, there's an Issa Leitzes in Bam. We spoke about the Mitzris, which has an extra Isser, and that we addressed by the fact that we explained Shlomo HaMelech did not have an actual marriage there, so that took care of that. And also we had a Chiddush, that a fellow who can't bear children, whether he's a Yisrael, a B'tzodaka, Krushavcha, he loses his Kedusha. Likewise, a Kohen in that state loses his Kedusha, and it allows them to marry women which they otherwise would not be allowed to marry, for instance, a Giyaris, a Meshachreris, or even a Nesina. Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi, how can you say that? V'anan, Tanan, take a look at our Mishnah. Tzodaka, Krushavcha, these individuals, who can they marry? They can't marry a Nesina. Mutarim begiyaris, meshachreres. Ha ben asina asira. They can't marry an asina. So how can you allow it? Basically, a kasha on that brisa, that a B'tzodaka Yisrael can marry an asina. The Mishnah indicates otherwise. Amar lei, Rav Ashi responds, according to your diuk, ema seifa. What does the second part of the Mishnah say? Ve'enan asurin elam malavei b'kol. These fellows should not marry a conventional Bas Yisrael. What does that sound like? Hab an asina shor. An asina is not considered to call, is mutter. Apparently this Mishnah is not trying to indicate anything, meaning it's sort of you have conflicting implications. The Reisha is mashma one thing, the Sefer something else, so you can't really bring a raya from the Mishnah. Asurim v'isurin Israelim. A ger who arise from the nation of Ammon or Moav may not marry a Bas Yisrael, and this is a Isser Olam, an ongoing perpetual Isser, first generation, second generation, third generation. There's no termination. Aval nikvayse mutaris miyad. This only applies to males, but they're nikvayse a mutar immediately upon converting. Mitzivra daimi, a ger from the nation of Mitzrayim or Edom, Einam Asurim, Elad Shalaisha Doris. It only extends up until, not including the third generation. Echad Zcharim, Echad Nekevas, so the ger itself and his child are Asur, but his grandchild is Muta, as we had in the story with Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda and his friend. And this applies to Echad Zcharim, Echad Nekevas on both sides of the Mechitza. Rabbi Shimon Matters and Nekevas Mihad. He says, look, by Mitzrim and Adoimim, it's only an Isser for the Zcharim and not the Nekevas. Now prove it with a Kavachim. Om Rabbi Shimon Kavachim Radvar. Uma b'makim she'asr es ha-Zcharim Israel. Take a look at the Ammon and the Moav. It's a forever Isser. So it has that Chumrah still. Hitter es ha-Nekevas miyad. The Isser was never applied to Nekevas. Certainly, Makim Shalai Asar es Ascharim by the Mitzri and the Adoimim, where the Isser even to the Scharim was only limited Elad Shleisha Ders, then of course Einoi Din Shenater Senakevas Miyad, the Isser should never apply to the Nekevas. That was his way of thinking. Amr Loi Tanakam responded to him, the Chacham responded, look, it depends what you're sourced in. Where are you coming from? Im halacha, if it's a halacha, you accept it from your Rebbe, Nakabal will accept it as fact. But Vim Ladin, if it's based on this Kavachemer, based on logic, yes, Shuva, you should know we can refute that Kavachemer, and the Gemara will go into it. Amar Lam, he responds, Loiki, not so. You can't refute my Kavachemer, it's first of all. And secondly, on top of that, actually, Hanocha, Ani Aimer, it's coming from my Rebbe, it's a stated halacha. How do we know that the Isser by the Ammon and the Mayavim only applies to men and not Nekevas? Rabbi Yechanan, we have the whole story with Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech, which proves our point. The Makra. Shaul is David. Shaul notices David going out to confront the Plishti, Goliath. Amar, he turned El Avner Saratzava to his general Avner. Could you tell me, Ben Mi Zehanar? This Nar, this youngster, whose son is he? Which family does he belong to? Ben Mi Zehanar, Avner. Avner, please tell me what's going on. Avner responds with a shvuah, Chei Nafshach HaMelech, in the name of Shaul HaMelech. In his life, he made a shvuah. In Yodati, I swear that I have no idea who this is. What do you mean, Avner did not recognize David? V'ksiv. He was very familiar with David HaMelech, very close to him. He had a special dearness to him. He actually helped him with his equipment. So apparently it wasn't just a question of identity. It was something more than that. Elo avua komasho. Shaul was curious as to his lineage. Who is his father? V'aviv lo yadalei. Shaul was not familiar with David HaMelech's father Yishai, a famous man. Yishai lived in the time of Shaul, was an older person. Baba Anoshim would come with people. He had a large entourage. It's referring to Yishai, the father of David. David he would go in with the whole crowd. Rashi says he was a general over 600,000 people. Go out with the Nechlusa. The most famous general in his time. What do you mean? He didn't know who he was. Shaul was referring to something more profound. I know who he comes from. I know he hails from Yishai, who comes from Shevet Yehuda. Yehuda had two sons, Peretz and Zorach. Where does David hail from? Where is he coming from? Who is his great-grandfather? Peretz or Zorach? And this had very significant implications. As per Shaul HaMelech's peace of mind, he felt threatened. He felt that David HaMelech was encroaching on his malchus, as we're going to see soon. So he wanted to know where he comes from. Which DNA does he have? Imi Peretz Asi, Imi Zorach Asi. Imi Peretz Asi. Does he come from Peretz? Very often one's name is truly indicative of his future personality, of his midas, of his destiny. Peretz is a lotion of pirza, breaching, power. Does he come from Peretz? Well, then I'm really concerned. Malka Havi, he's going to turn out to be a king, and overtake me. Sha'amelach peiritz lasas derech ve'mimachem b'yadei. We have the halacha that a king just breach his way through without any objection. We can't get in his way. That's the koyach of a king. So is Paris his grandfather, which would indicate his future destiny as king? Im Zorach asi. Does he come from Zorach? In that case, I'm okay. Chashiva ba'al mahavi is just an indication of future prominence. Zorach, illumination. He'll lead. He'll occupy a position of prominence, but he won't threaten my position, my leadership. That was his question. Why was he so into this? My time amarle sha'alale. Why was he telling Avner to figure this out? What prompted this investigation? Because the pasuk says, "Vayalvish Shaul es David madav kimidase." Shaul, who was very tall, took his own begadim, and in a show of dearness to David, this was way back, years before, he put it onto David HaMelech, and it fit him perfectly. Uksivbe b'Shaul, and actually Shaul was very tall. Mishichmei mamal. Shaul was head and shoulders above everybody else, extra tall. And when he put it on David HaMelech, not long before this whole story, so when he put it on to David HaMelech, suddenly it sort of shrunk and fit him perfectly. It was a perfect custom fit. It was a miraculous, expression of dearness from Hashem. And Shaul took it as a threatening sign. He says, "Look, what's going on? The royal robes are suddenly fitting this fellow who's so much smaller than I am." And therefore, he started investigating as to his, familial roots. So he asked Avner to look into his background. And there was another fellow standing by. Amarle Doeg ha'adaymi. Doeg got up and he says, "Look, Achate mashal olav." Before you start asking about him, im hagan hula malchus, if he's fit for royalty, im lav or not, sha'al olav. Why don't you ask im roy lova b'kol im lav, whether he's even fit to marry in the fold, whether he's even roy to be accepted in the community. My time, and why not? Don't you know that his grandmother's Rus from Moav? We don't accept Moav people. That was Doeg's input. Amalei Avner. So Avner took on David HaMelech's defense. He says, "Tanina, what do you mean? We have a Mishnah, Bryce. Amoyne v'lei amoynes, Moavi v'lei Moavis. This halacha only relates to the men, not to the women. Rus is a female. She doesn't taint his background. He's fully roy to marry and to become a king." Elamiatas. So Doeg responded, "What about the word mamzer in the Torah? Are you going to tell me v'lei mamzer is only a male mamzer is problematic, but not a female?" Responds Avner, "What do you mean? Mamzer ksiv. It says mamzer. What does mamzer mean? It's a joint word, mumzar, a blemish due to inappropriate foreign behavior. The Torah is giving you the reason, the basis for the psul mamzer. And that applies equally to men and to women. You can't differentiate. What about mitzri?" That was his next question. What about mitzri? You can tell me v'lei mitzris only affects the men and not the women? Responds Avner, there's a special reason why pertaining to Amoinu Moav it's limited to men. Shan Yachadim Afarish time of the Krah, the pasuk explains why we distance them. Allah shalai kidmu eschem alechem b'mayim. Due to the fact that they failed to greet you with bread and water on your way out of Mitzrayim. And only the men are to blame, not the women. Darke shel ish lekadem. Well, darke shel ish lekadem is the way of the man to go and greet and to go present. Women stays home. So only men are accountable, not women. Responds Doeg, what do you mean? Hayolem lekadim anoshim lekras anoshim, v'noshim lekras noshim. Sure, the women should have came out, should have greeted the women. The men should have looked after the men, and the women after the women. Ishtik. That argument silenced Avner. He didn't have a response. Okay, so now it was up in the air. Does the Isra of the Amoini and the Avi pertain to only men or even to women? Miyad, immediately, Vayomer Melech. This is going back to that pasuk we had in the beginning of the sugya. So Shaul took Avner to task. He says, "Look, you're here to defend David HaMelech. You got to find out. Vayomer Melech Sha'al Ata ben mi zeh ha'elam." So go to the base medrash and find out the halacha, how to treat this elam. What kind of status does he have? Now, Hasam Karle Nar. Initially, the pasuk refers to him as a nar. Hacha Karle Elam. And then he switches to Elam. Why the change in terminology? Hacha Karmele, he meant to tell him like this: Halacha nis alam muchaluk. You forgot this halacha. This halacha has been concealed from you. Sevish al beis hamedrash. Go ask in the basement. Shaul, he went to the beis medrash. Amalei, and they told him, no problem. Amoini v'leim amoinis. Moyavi v'leim moyavis. He's okay. Rus was a female, unaffected by this halacha. Okay, Doeg didn't let go. Actually, Doeg bombarded them with all his questions. How can you be machsharit? What do you mean? Ishtiku. So they were stumped. They couldn't respond. So they wanted to proclaim him as being puzzled. Miyad. Immediately, somebody else came to his defense. He came to David's defense. Here, the pasuk refers to him as Yisra HaYisraeli. And elsewhere it says, Uksiv Yeser HaYishmaeli. So which one is it? Amarava Yishmaeli is describing what he did. He strapped on his sword like a Ishmael, like an Arab, and he's threatened. He says, whoever disregards this halacha that I'm about to say, will be struck by this cheref. He should know. This is a halacha that I, myself, was makabel from the bezn of Shmuel, from Ramah. Amoini is dafka the male, v'lei amoinis. Mayavi, you can't join Klal Yisrael, v'lei mayavis. That's it, it's an absolute fact. And this is Machshir David HaMelech. Says the Gemara, how can you believe him? When suddenly he shows up in the middle of the story. Perhaps he has an agenda that he's pursuing. Umi Mehemen, can you believe a Talmud Chacham who's testifying and presenting a halacha? Maybe he's being opportunistic. Maybe it's not Neman, it's not to be relied upon. Vamar ba'abba marav, call Talmud Chacham shemoira halacha upa. When a Talmud Chacham comes and presents a halacha, im kaidem ma'ase amra, if it's before the fact, while they're learning the sugya, presents a halacha. He says, look, I know this halacha from my Rebbe. We trust it, we believe it. But if it's in the middle of the heat of a debate, suddenly he shows up with a halacha. You can't trust him. Now Taisus points out, this is dafka when the Talmud Chacham perhaps has an interest. He has some sort of gain or benefit from this halacha, as we find in this case, because Amasa was Ben Ish. And Taisus brings the drasha that he was a descendant of Yishai Avi David, so he was also part of that family. So perhaps he was pursuing his own agenda. But he says otherwise, if it's just an impartial halacha, nothing to do with him, then of course we trust him. But in this case, Davka, perhaps he was pushing his own agenda. Showing up in the middle of the story and presenting a halacha in the name of the bezn of Shmuel. How could you believe him? Says the more Shani Hacha. Here it's very, very different than your typical the Shmuel ubeis dinei kayim. Look, Shmuel and his bezn are right there. Go and ask them. Nobody would lie to this effect. So bottom line is, he informed them of an accepted halacha established by Shmuel and his bezn. We darshed in the pasuk in that manner. Rus HaMa'aviyah is perfectly fine, and likewise David HaMelech. Says the Gemara, what about that kasha that was presented by Doeg HaAdomi? You're not blaming the women of Ammon and Moav. What do you mean? They should have come out and greeted the women. So why don't we distance them as well? Answers the Gemara, Hacha Tergemu in Bavel, they explained, they answered, an Ish is not meant to be roaming around, even if she's trying to look after the other Nashim. Kol Kvuda Balas Melech Prima, an Isha stays inside. Marava Amrin, as Shol, they said, Vitema Rabbi Yitzchak, maybe Rabbi Yitzchak, Amakra, we have another source from the Pasuk in Vayera. Vayoyimru Ela Vayesar Eshtecha, the Malachim were wondering as to the whereabouts of Sarah, and he said, look, Hine Baal, she's in the tent, apparently that's where she belongs. And Torah doesn't hold them to task for not coming out and treating the Bnei Yisrael. So bottom line is, Rus HaMa'aviyah was fine to marry a fine Jewish man who happened to be Boaz, and consequently David HaMelech was fit, was kosher, and David HaMelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. Okay, so what did we learn today? A couple of things. We started with Nikav. So if there was a puncture in the Eivar HaZachar, and it was healed, it was nistan properly, then it's fine. He's back to normal. Can we make a test to determine, the health of that scab or whatever? Yeah, we do a carry test. We try to get some zera accumulated in that makom, and then we see how it holds up. The Gemara concluded this only concerns us in the Atorah itself, because below the Atorah there's never concern. It could even be removed completely. And as Rashi points out, above the Atorah there's never an issue of pressure and accumulation. How do we test out this fellow? We use the lechem cham formula to generate the zera, which gives us that test. In two halachas we don't follow Rabba and Rabbi Rav Huna. Rabba's chiddush that one who's matal mayim mishtei mekaymes, that's a concern. We don't agree with that. Nor do we hold like Rav Huna that the noshim who interact with each other as married is just pritzes, but doesn't turn them into a zoina. They're still right to marry a kaim. Rav Sheshes came up with a great chiddush that a fellow who's a p'tzur, since he no longer can access a Bas Yisrael, he's considered somewhat downgraded in terms of marriage, downgraded from his restriction. So a kain can marry Giyoris, Mishachreres, a Yisrael can marry Nasina. And that's the conclusion of the Gemara. Shlomo Melech interacted with Bas Pari after she became a Giyoris L'Shem Shamayim, but he didn't actually marry her because she was a mitzvah to which nobody can, Yisrael is not meant to marry. We learned in the Mishnah that a mitzvah and a doimi are accepted in the fold but cannot marry up until 3 dairas. They can marry Yisraelim. This applies to Scharim and Nekevas. Rabbi Shimon disagrees with the Nekevas aspect. He says they're mutter right away. And by the Aman and Moav, it's a la'olam. It goes on perpetually. It doesn't stop at 3 generations, but it's limited to Zacharim. As we had the drasha, Amoini v'lei Amoinis, Mayavi v'lei Me'avis, the women are not held to task because, as we explained, Kol Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima, she's meant to stay inside and was not expected to go out and greet Klal Yisrael, and therefore they don't suffer the consequences. All the best to you and much hatzlacha.